Hey everyone, I'm Mike Lowe, and today we're talking about the best college football game that you've never heard of. This game has just come out of early beta release on Steam. It's going to be available soon for Mac as well, and version 1 just released. I've been playing this game for probably over a year now in the early release phase, and it's awesome. So there's a lot to get to in this video, and the game we're talking about is Football Coach College Dynasty. It's not perfect, but it's darn near close. It's the only college football game that has NIL in it at this point. It's crazy deep. It's not perfect. There's a few things that I don't love, like some of the visuals that we'll talk about. But what I plan to do in this video is we're going to go through an entire season as a coach here. We're going to include some of the mods that are available from the community and just kind of give you a good feel for what this game looks like, kind of like a year in the life of a football coach running a college dynasty. So let's jump into it. The first thing we're going to be doing is choosing our difficulty level, and you may want to jump in with normal, but understand that it already gives you a leg up. So it's almost like this to me should be called easy. I'm going to go with legend because it's really hard, it's really fun, but it's not like how Civilization kind of makes everything artificially more difficult. It just kind of helps keep the CPU a little more competitive. So we're going to go with legend. From there, we have a few options of how we're going to start the league. Of course, you can use default 78 fictional teams. You can visit the Steam Workshop, or you can load custom. So like I even have an old custom one here, but this is from like early December. The Jeff mods are awesome. It's the one I'd highly recommend. But now with the version 1, you can actually load this up right inside of Steam. And so I had version 18 saved locally. This is now up to version 20. And if you were to kind of go into the Steam Workshop and investigate this, you would see that's where we're going to be doing here. So we're going to select this. It's version 20. It's going to load all of the real life FBS schools. It's got updated things like the rivalries are connected right. So it's going to be in really, really good shape here. So you can see there the version 20, and we're going to start with that. That then takes us to the options screen, and there are a ton of options. We're going to leave a lot of these at default for this video, but you can change the playoff format. You can adjust how frequently realignment happens. You can determine draft eligibility to go to the pros, transfer eligibility, NIL settings. There's just so much you can do here that not even EA Sports College Football is letting you do. You can set up the amount of money that schools are receiving. There's just a ton of different things here. I could probably do a whole video on just the settings. You have injury settings. I talked about there are a few things in this game that I would still like to see adjusted. Injuries is one of them. Injuries don't happen during games. They kind of simulate like after a game. So it's not ideal, but truthfully, EA Sports College Football is does that a little bit anyway, where you have the player who is hurt and leaves, come back, hurts again and leaves. They keep doing that kind of fluttering back and forth in and out of games. And then at the end of the game, they're usually not hurt, or sometimes they'll have a 6-week injury. So it's kind of all over the place. So really, we don't really have a college football game that's having a fully functional injury setting, which is hard to believe in 2025. But here you can see that we have the workshop mod loaded. You can also load recruiting folders, recruiting classes. So this is pretty amazing here. Of course, you can check Steam. I don't think we're going to probably see anything just yet, but rest assured that's going to definitely be something that'll be here soon. And so super, super cool. You can see people have even started making high school universes. Just awesome stuff here. So super exciting there. We're going to leave this at default, as I mentioned, and just kind of jump in and get going here. I think we're picking our team next. Before we actually pick our school, we have to pick how we want to play the game. We have School Dynasty mode, which is where you control one school forever, or kind of like the traditional coach career mode. Now, I know what jumps out on this page are the nasty graphics, and I can't stress enough to the developer of this game, you have an amazing game here. These images cheapen your game tremendously. Get them out. They're bad. If you want to leave them as an option, that's fine. There's too many Gen AI options out there with video and images that could be an option with this, and it really, really cheapens the game, in my opinion. This game's too good to have images that look like this. So with that being said, we're actually going to go with School Dynasty mode. I usually do coach career mode, probably for all the reasons that you do, but just to kind of test this out, I wanted to play around with the School Dynasty mode, which is where, again, you're just going to control the school forever. What's really neat about this is you can use custom schools. Now that's similar to Team Builder in a way. What's different though is you can actually edit the existing schools, and that's not just the team you control. You can edit every single FBS school if you want, and this is why we're seeing mods that are like high school mods, where it's they're building actual high school conferences, of course, with different enrollments and the different logos and so on. And so you can really kind of build whatever you want with this. It's super, super cool. And for this video, though, we're just going to leave things at default. We're going to go with Alabama this time. Just because I wanted to kind of give you the big dog experience, but also because Alabama had a bit of a down year by their standards in 2024. Rivals have been updated in that Jeff mod I showed you, and so that's going to be working really, really well. And then we're able to go through and either just use like the coaching staff that generated for us, or you can go through and pick custom coaches. And let me rephrase that. It's not so much custom coaches, but you can either pick the default coach or a different default coach that's giving you an option. So let's talk about like what the coaches look like. So of course we have here Marcus Rosenberg, who is the default assigned head coach for Alabama. And he is a balanced pass first offensive coach and a nickel balanced man defensive coach. These obviously will kind of connect into your coordinators. I would say it's probably even more valuable in your coordinators. But if we look at these ratings that are on a 10-point scale, offensive play calling 9, defensive play calling 2, training 6, and recruiting 7. And that key is up here. So again, pretty good recruiter, but a really, really good offensive mind. And that's why he gets that offensive genius score. For me, I really, especially at a big program, I'm looking kind of at these levels. Sure, it'd be nice to get someone even younger potentially, but to me, I'm just looking at kind of the level first and then looking at if it's something that I'd actually want to run. Like for instance, I don't really want to run like an air raid or an option. And so we're actually going to stick with Marcus Rosenberg. We're also going to stick with Cohen Webb, the offensive coordinator here. We are going to change, my bad. And we're going to go with Oliver Carney here. So kind of a balanced run first offensive coordinator. That's going to sort of offset and complement a little bit in ways. So we have like a balanced connection, but then pass first, run first. Hey, maybe that balances out the offense a little. So again, really, really good offensive coach. He's considered an offensive CEO, I believe, because he's kind of chipping in a little bit nicely with recruiting. And then defensive coordinator, we're going to go with Caden Moran instead of Jet Baker. And so again, 4-3, I didn't really have a great nickel option here, so it's not an exact match, but we'll kind of see how it goes. We'll see if it really is going to matter. Now, this guy is a defensive recruiter. You can see he's really going to help us bring in some really nice defensive recruits. So I set up my initial coaching staff. Of course, you could just roll with the default they gave you, and we're ready to start the game. So we're at the start of the game now, and this game actually starts you in the preseason. And the game does a really good job of kind of breaking down, like, one, the stage you're in and what you need to get done in this stage. And so we have this splash screen here, and it's telling us that we need to get through player changing positions, and then also I believe we're going to be doing redshirting here. So if you're ever not sure, sometimes you'll get this pop-up screen. You can also just kind of check up here, and it'll kind of walk you through like what needs to be done at this stage. And then here, of course, you can see kind of the upcoming stages that are happening. So again, the game does a really good job of kind of laying this out. The interface, it's not clunky per se. It's just going to take a little getting used to. It's a lot different than like EA Sports College Football or Madden or something like this. It's just going to be a little bit of a different layout than I'm used to seeing in sports games. So let's take a look around, and we'll get this team kind of set up and look at any potential position changes, and we'll get some red shirt set. So actually it says here it's redshirting. We'll do that in the next phase. It also said on that splash screen that you can actually just skip this position change area and you'd be okay. But I want to just kind of show you what it looks like. So these are players just rated, or they're listed in just kind of overall, the highest overall being first here. And as I click on each player, I can click on choosing a new position, and you can see it makes sense. Like you can move this corner to safety. He might take a little hit in overall, but maybe it makes sense for the scheme you're trying to do. And you can do this with really any position. Some players are going to transition pretty well. Others will be like, ooh, that's not really going to be a pretty good fit at all. So again, you'll eventually get to some players here that, maybe you either see that they're better, or like in this case here with Tyler Daniel, he could really do either or. And so if we wanted to move this 6'1", 208-pound receiver to running back, we could. And again, you just have to kind of go through and look at your needs. I think for this phase, we're just going to jump ahead and we're going to go into the next phase of the preseason. We're now into the off-season gains section of the preseason, and there's not much to do here. As it says, it's really just kind of showing you how players have progressed. So of course you can just scroll through and kind of see who your high gainers are. I think like most college games, you don't really see players like going down. You'll see some that stay at 0, but for the most part, everyone across the board is going to increase there. Next, we're on to the game plan install, and this is one of the areas where this game really starts to separate itself from even EA Sports College Football. even games like Madden, even other like sports sim football games that I've seen. This is really cool. So we have our coaching staff that we already hired that you can see they're kind of taking into consideration the head coach ratings and your coordinator ratings. And down here, we're getting kind of this overall score. And so you can see how this is broken down. There are benefits to having the playbook match, as we said. And then you can see the difficulty modifier that we set earlier in the video also coming into play here. So we're going to have a pretty strong offense. My head coach is actually a better offensive person than the coordinator even. And so you could make the argument like, well, maybe we just stick with what the head coach wants to do, which would be balanced and pass first. So I don't know. Well, let's just see what that does. That keeps it at 10. We're going to just go ahead and do that. On the defensive side, it's kind of the opposite situation. Caden Moran is much, much better of a defensive coach than our head coach. And so we're going to just kind of go with what he wants to do, which is 4-3 balanced. So I think the head coach will have a little bit more involvement on the offense here, what's also really cool about this is you can go into formation tendencies and you can set up a lot of different things here as far as like what formations you want to run your offense or defense out of. And so this is where the game gets really deep. You can use or spend a lot of time in this area customizing how you want to do things. And so it's just really, really cool. Again, I love that this all matters. It all impacts things. You can, of course, just let it kind of sit how you want, which is what we're going to do for this video. But just a lot of customization. You can spend a lot of time in this game just tinkering around in the preseason. And before we jump ahead, it's probably obvious, but you'll want to take into consideration, of course, your team roster. And again, just didn't actually show the weights you can do with the defense here, which is just, again, super, super cool. We've now advanced from the preseason into the spring. And when you're in this spring section, there's a few things you can do. As it says in the little help box here, during spring and summer, there are 3 main activities to be done: recruiting, practicing, and training. Practice is optional, but recruiting and training are essential to prepare for the upcoming season. Practice, to be clear, also has no impact on things. It doesn't make you more prepared for games. It's literally just a place for you to practice calling plays, to kind of see the play's effectiveness, but it's not going to matter. You could do 0 practice and your team's going to be, ready to go, so to speak, for that week. Finally, the last thing I'll say on the recruiting area is you're going to still want to scout players. Again, that's going to help fill in some of these things like a player's potential once you get up to like a certain percentage, and you'll start to learn more about players, and you'll quickly realize like, oh, no, this player is really not what I thought. So make sure you go through and spend your scouting as well. Now, I've gone through and assigned my scouting to just the top 10 players that were on our priority board here. You're still going to see things in this game like gems, and I'm assuming busts too, so that's pretty cool. I don't know if you have to get to 60% to see that. This player was already scouted up to this, so usually at 40% is when you start to see potential. And these potentials don't change. It's not like if I scout him to 80, that might turn to a B- or something. Once it's there, it's there. I have confirmation of that from the community on Discord on that with the game. So once you see the information, it is what it is. Some of the ratings and stuff may fluctuate, but I think potential is locked in from what I was told. I'm going to actually start with training, and we'll get to recruiting here in a second. So training, I can just say you can spend a lot of time deciding on what you want to do here, but some of the things that you're going to want to keep in mind is, of course, the player's role in the team, which includes their overall rating. Are they going to be starters? Is it a backup that you're trying to develop? Is it like a huge hole in your roster? And then, of course, player potential. This is going to matter, the particular grade that they have. And then from there, there's a lot of different things you can do, and it's all a little bit different. So you have points to spend as a head coach. So like here we have 2 training exercises that our head coach can do. This isn't per player. This is per week in your spring preseason. And then you have 2 for your offensive coordinator, and we have 2 for our defensive coordinator. And so, again, head coach can also impact things like your kicking and punting, but these are pretty much the same across the board. And of course, the rarer they are, the more points it's going to have and the potential impact it will make. But you'll see, like if I go to my starter here and I want to increase his arm strength, well, there's the potential gain that he'd get like 3 to 3 points. I've never seen that, but basically 3 points. But there's like a 0% chance of that actually happening. So like breakthrough is literally just like, is it going to happen or not? I'd be much smarter to work on his strength if I wanted to. But that's going to cost me a head coach point as opposed to an offensive coordinator point. So as I said, you can get lost in this and spend a lot of time looking at this because you got 80 guys or whatever, 75 guys to look through and kind of make the decisions for, with really only like 6 things that you can do per week in the spring. And every player is a bit different. So like Sebastian Sanders has C minus potential, but he's a little bit younger. And so he's going to actually get a little bit more accuracy. If we look at it was arm strength, I think we were looking at. His is kind of the same thing, not really going to improve that. Strength, 66%. His accuracy is likely to break through, but not great. You're still taking a bit of a risk there. And then we'll see what his was because I don't think we looked at accuracy. 62%. So you'd actually be better to go with this guy if you wanted to improve, say, accuracy for your starter. And again, probably because his potential is higher. And as you just flip through the different positions, you're going to see players with, higher potentials. I'm going to try to show you one with like a really, really high potential here. Let's do one that's really low first. So here, a receiver, D minus potential, and a senior. So yeah, this is probably about as rough as it's going to get. And you can see it's kind of a coin flip at best. Depending what you're doing, the head coach isn't going to have a ton of impact unless you want to work on strength. And so it just makes sense. Like you can't come in here and like spam speed. And so I just think that's really, really cool how they've done this. And you have to really just kind of pick and choose like where you want to spend this. Like Kenneth Moore, he is kind of like a run blocking offensive lineman here. A minus potential. So again, strength, pretty likely to have a breakthrough. Hard to tell. But if you do something like run blocking that he's already really good at, it's going to be much harder. So like as these scores start to scale up, it gets more difficult. So you kind of get the idea there. You're going to have multiple weeks to do this, just like you're going to have multiple weeks to do kind of that preseason recruiting. So unlike college football for EA Sports, where you have like 1 week of kind of that preseason recruiting and whatnot, you're going to get a handful. I think it's 3 weeks here. Yeah, two spring weeks, and then it goes into summer, and you kind of do similar things there. So we'll talk about that when we get to these stages, but that's kind of how training looks so far. So let's go in and look at recruiting. Now there's a lot of information here. You're going to want to read this on recruiting. Of course, you can just autofill the targets. You can view recommended targets from your staff, but let's just close out of this and just kind of get to the default recruiting module here. So it's obviously very important to keep an eye on like your team needs, but also don't ignore players who are really, really good and want to come to school with you. So it's going to be a very, very similar setup to what you see in EA Sports College Football in that regard. What's nice is you have a lot of different filters here that you can use. And again, you can just really just go in and like even look at their recommended targets. So this is like who our staff's saying we can go in and get. And each of these players are going to have other schools interested. You're going to have, again, these are estimates, which I love. This is something that people have been talking about with EA Sports College Football that they'd love to see, not showing you exactly where your opponents stand, but giving you like an estimate, and maybe some of it's based on like the accuracy of your team staff or something like that. So this is really, really cool. There's a ton here that we can kind of break down. You'll eventually be able to see recruit visits and their priorities and so on. And so there's just really, really cool things here. And of course, as you scout that player, you'll start to see things like their potential become unhidden. You'll start to see some of these ratings either change or be shown from like letters to numbers. So you'll have a total of 10 like scouting trips you can basically do. And that's one of the quickest ways you can get information on a player is by scouting them. When you go to target a player, it just kind of adds them like to a short list. And so it, again, is sort of similar to setting up like your big board in college football. And yeah, there's just a lot here. So it's similar in ways. It's going to be something that probably feels the most familiar in this game from EA Sports College Football. But let's take some time here. I'm going to go and set up my recruiting board, and then we'll come back in just a second. Now, what I've done here is I just went with the auto recruiting for now. And what it's done so far is just added 40 targets to my board. And what's interesting is when I go down and look at these, and by the way, again, I mentioned the navigation of this game takes a little getting used to. Right now, we're highlighted on my targets. We're not on all recruits, and we're not at my commits yet. I have 25 commitments, so guys I could actually sign. I could use 50 offers. So like you could kind of like offer for each, say if you had 25 holes you're trying to fill, you could offer 2 players per hole. You just can't sign all of these players. Like this is how many, like, again, tickets you could give out, but this is how many people are going to get through the gate if you think about it like that. So we have our 40 targets set up, and this is not including all recruits, and this was just using what the AI did. And I was very interested to kind of see what they did. So this is the priority order. By the way, look how many different filters you can use on this if you wanted just to kind of like filter things out or sort. Actually, that's not even the filter. That's just the sorting. The filtering, also super impressive is in this drop down. So, I mean, there's just so many things you can do to like just kind of filter different players you're looking for. But in this case here, we're looking at what the CPU kind of set up for our priority order. But let's look at the recruit rating. And the first thing that jumped out at me is like, wow, is Alabama, they didn't add any 5-star players, which is interesting. There's some nice players here. I mean, 81 overall freshman cornerback, that looks pretty good in Carlos Gilchrist here. So that's really nice. But I was really kind of surprised. And so like, well, how do I go and see all of the recruits? It's a little cumbersome. Like even if I reset the filters, nothing is really happening. And it's because of up here, right? We're on this My Targets tab. If you click on all recruits, now we're outside of just the 40 I was looking at. It still shows me like what we're kind of targeting here, right? And you can still filter, but now we're looking at the recruit rating across the country. And so what's interesting is we have Alabama really not showing up anywhere. You have a lot of big schools, a lot of big programs, but you don't see there's Alabama on one of them. So like we should probably be going after Devin James, right? And so, but we're just not seeing a ton of that. And so for whatever reason, they've kind of maybe been a little too conservative at their recruiting. That's up to you. I mean, if I'm a top 3 and if the 5-star player, I'm probably giving him a shot, especially as Alabama. But let's just kind of see how it goes. I'll kind of see how the CPU does handling this because I think it's a good insight. This is why I like to kind of do tests with just letting the CPU run things. It's a good insight into like how your opponents are going to be handling things. And I think just kind of the complexity of the game and how the CPU teams are doing. Because if they're not a challenge, if they're not even remotely intelligent at what they're doing, this is going to get old really fast and this game's not going to hold up. So I don't think that'll be the case, but let's put it to the test a little bit here. Okay, so now I'm back on My Targets, and now, even though we have 40 players on our recruit board, we still have our recruit actions that we have to do. And this is going to be each of these weeks here. So like preseason spring 1, it'll be spring 2, and into the summer and so on. And so these are the things that we're going to want to do. You have 10 camp visits that are the most impactful thing. This is going to be like you get the most information back. It seems to really influence their interest in the school. So again, you're not visiting them like you would in college football. This is them like coming to an actual football camp that you're holding. And so you also have your 6 head coach pitches. Again, these are different than the training that we saw. We only had 2. This is for recruiting. And you have these pitches you can do with your coaches, and you have pitches you can do with your coordinator. Sometimes the coordinator pitches are actually higher than the head coach ones. It really just kind of depends how good of a staff you have and what their specialties are. And you can see here the recruiting actions above will replenish at the start of each week. And so we want to make sure we fill these out. I'm just going to go ahead and auto-fill these. And now they're all gone. And then we can kind of scroll down and see what they've done. And so on our board, if we go back to the priority order, of course, it makes sense, right? They're inviting to camp the top players. And if you wanted to change these, you just click these and you can kind of see the different impact that they would have. They all say 0 remaining because we have them spread out elsewhere. So you'd have to remove it from a player. But let's just say you wanted Alexander Gilbert and you wanted to give him the highest thing. And maybe that wasn't like next week. You can't do camp invite more than once. So he'll have a camp visit. But then next week, maybe you want to switch this one to the ace pitch. And then you could do that, and then you have room to invite someone else to camp. So you'll definitely want to spend some time. You're going to spend a lot of time recruiting this game. So if you're into recruiting, that's good news for you because you're going to love it. It's a lot deeper. You're going to spend more time, especially here in the preseason, as you start kind of ironing things out with your recruit board and whatnot. All right, so we've set up all of our recruiting actions. I'm not worried about practice. And we have gone through and done our trainings as well. And again, we can sort by the results for the week. And we can see that the training impacts that we've had. So we've increased some zone coverage and strength with players and so on. And at that point, I think we're ready to go. If you're ever not sure, you can always click up to the current stage you're on. And it does a pretty good job of kind of tracking what still needs to be done. I'm out of recruit actions. I have no more trainings left. And so we're ready to advance. And now that we're into preseason spring 2, this pattern is just going to repeat. We can go into recruitings. We have 22 activities to do here again. And we can even scroll down and just kind of see the progress we've made. And we've made really good progress on these 4 stars. So maybe this is a good strategy. Instead of just having, say, going after the top guys, like we had the last time, it was just like these top 3 had us as number 1. Now just about everyone on our priority board has us at number 1. There are a few that don't. But scrolling up now, we can see, there's just a ton. We have our number 17 guy. He has a second. And if we go to the third page of this, I mean, we just have a ton of players now, some 3-star guys now interested in Alabama, at least as like the top 2. So definitely in good shape to put together a pretty nice class here. I'm curious to see what things look like when we start looking at those 5 stars again, to see if we're like still on any of these boards. I think we were on one player's board. There he is. So we're still there. I'm curious to see if the AI will like eventually add him. We have a couple players there in the top 10. It's interesting to me that they're not going after them, but maybe we will here if we just kind of let the CPU do its thing in spring 2. You'll notice here that I have auto recruit disabled, but I'm still kind of using it. So I'm still using the auto assign recruit actions. At least that's what I did in the first spring week. What I'm curious now is if we went in and configured this, I wonder if this will make them a little bit smarter. So I'm just going to turn all of this on and just let kind of the auto recruiting happen. It says this may change your targeted players. That's good. We kind of want that to happen a little bit. And I want to see if we can get these 5-star guys to kind of pop up. So you can see now it's handled all of this really, really quickly. We still have 40 players. We still have to do some scouting. It looks like it won't do the scouting on its own. But let's now go down to our targets and let's kind of see how they're doing it here. So priority order, why are we seeing 3 stars? Okay, what's going on here? Okay, that's recruit rating. Seems to have these like backwards for some reason. So not exactly sure why that's happening. It's probably something really, really simple that I'm missing. But we have a few 3 stars here. Oh, that's our priority order. My bad. Yeah. So recruit rating is what I meant to click on. And you can see we still don't have any 5 stars. So kind of interesting here that those guys still aren't popping up here. But let's give it some time. Maybe if we kind of switch to the next week, it'll start doing that for us. So we're just about ready to advance again. We've done the auto trainings here. We have gone through all of our recruit actions. And yeah, I think we're ready to jump to summer, I think is the next one. So let's jump ahead. We are set to go. And we'll see how things are looking. We've advanced actually all the way to the preseason expectations. Summer 1 and Summer 2 in the preseason are just like the spring. I've autoed the training and I've autoed the recruiting. When you're doing your own Dynasty, obviously spend a little more time in those sections, but for this video, we're just kind of ripping through it. So the expectations themselves, finish in the top 8, we're ranked number 4 right now, or win the conference championship. And we're kind of slated like number 2 in the SEC behind Georgia. We have our athletic director, who is Jose Mota. He's a hot-headed individual, so of course probably going to be a little impatient, as to be expected. 50 coach opinion right down the middle to start with. Here's where this game really separates itself from other games again. We have boosters. So Alabama boosters, it says boosters will contribute money to the school at the end of the season, with more money being donated if you meet your bonus objectives. So let's just look through this. Alabama booster negotiation before the season. You can negotiate with boosters to change their objectives. The number of boosters and your AD coach opinion determines how many negotiations can occur. So we get 2 negotiations we can use. Again, that's kind of based on our reputation and so on. And then we can go in and make these adjustments. And so you have different donors to the school. And I've played with small schools. I'm now playing with a big school here. This looks very, very different based on where you're at. So we have Alexander Schmidt, of course, a fictional donor here, 42-year-old, donating $6.5 million. What is his interest? Well, he's interested in team defense, and this is sort of a 4-year donation that he's making. He's considered a gold donor by the school, and there's a bonus of almost 50%, $4.5 million. So this would make this $11 million total if we hold at least one opponent to 3 points or fewer. So I like the sounds of that. I feel like with Alabama, we can, especially our best player is a cornerback who I'll show you. But if we wanted to change it, you could go in here, you could click negotiate, you could make some different adjustments and whatnot. I'll leave that fun to you when you get into how you want to play this game. We're just going to leave these kind of as is. But as you scroll through, you'll see silver donors, you'll see bronze donors, and you can negotiate with all of them. But keeping in mind, you only have 2 negotiations. So you just need to kind of strategize and see which ones are going to fit. But I can tell you right now, Alabama's bringing in a lot of donation money. That's probably not a huge surprise, but wow, playing with something much, much smaller is going to be a totally different experience. Now I can scroll back up here. We can take a look at the schedule. Give you kind of a lay of the land there. We have 3 non-conference games. They're kind of in like wacky order. I mean, week 1 versus Big 12. Okay, that makes sense. And then later on, we play the Big 10 in week 4. Okay. And then we have Conference USA later. So I don't know if the schedules are going to be a little bit more traditional. Say if you pick an old school setup where you don't have like a playoff, or your non-conference games typically at the start of the season. We are seeing kind of like a shift in how scheduling is working, at least it seems, with just kind of how many things have been restructured as far as like teams needing to get certain games in, and just kind of the way the new conferences and scheduling is working. So I'm not really sweating this too much. At the end of the day, we have, I think, 12 games, 7 at home, 5 on the road. And yeah, it's going to be tough. We play Georgia, so the team that's ahead of us in the SEC, we're going to be playing them week 5 on the road. Again, there's just a lot of really, really cool stuff here. If we go to the news section, you can kind of get like an overview. This is stuff we're begging for in college football. This is stuff that we've seen way back in like college hoops 2K8. We've seen this in NFL 2K5 and so on. But just getting like more immersion. And again, it doesn't have to be crazy fancy. We talked about some of in other videos, I've talked about other games where it's like, well, I'd like to see, like let's use Gen AI to generate like an actual studio update like we see at the NBA 2K, but it's much more personalized. And it doesn't even have to be that. I mean, this here looks really good and it works. You can see here we are number 4 in the country. We have no players in the top kind of like players to watch on either side of the ball. But if we go to SEC, it looks like our best player is cornerback Julian Holiday. He's a 95 overall. So again, we'll keep an eye on him, especially with some of those defensive boosts that we're looking to get from our donors. And yeah, slotted to be against Georgia here. That's going to be our biggest competition as we look at the preseason rankings. So this video is starting to run longer than I wanted, and it's because this game is just so deep. We haven't even gotten to the regular season, which I'm about to do. I'm going to be advancing, and we're going to just start ripping through the season. So we're going to do a second version of this video. Part 2 is going to be the regular season and the playoffs, hopefully, if we make it. And we're just going to kind of go through, see how things look. So we'll kind of go full circle with this. We will end where we started with the beginning of this video. And in video 2, we will get through the entire season and see how Alabama looks. And then just kind of see how recruiting kind of resets itself next year. So leave a comment. Let me know if this video is helpful. I will be making video 2 very, very quickly. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on this game, whether you have it or not. I think it's excellent. I think it could still need some work. There's going to be some stuff in the second video that are still kind of dings to this game, in my opinion. But overall, we're looking at a game that's like A-, B+ range, especially considering how new this game is. I think it's really, really well-rounded. And I'm really excited to hear that they're making a pro version of this game. So please go check this game out. It's on Steam. They have an entire Discord that's dedicated to this. And I just think you're going to be really, really excited if you're into kind of like the old school tech sim games, but this has a much, much more modern feel to it. So guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thanks for giving the video a like, and I'll see you in the next one.